Oh, hi everybody. Thank you again for joining me. You're at home with Melissa, and what I want to do right now, look at how pretty that is. I want to take you on a tour of the property and just show you what we have going on, tell you a little bit about what we have planned and what we're doing today. Now, as you can see, we've got some wild phlox here. It's nice and tall and pretty. In between it, we have a little rock path, and growing up in the cracks, there are forget-me-nots and buttercups. Absolutely beautiful. And then, as you look this way, there's a field of forget-me-nots. Now, these are, I absolutely love forget-me-nots. And in my climate, they grow really well. They spread, they reseed, and they're just gorgeous. That delicate purple blue color, just a marvelous little flower. Give a great woodland feel to things. And you can see here, as you go along, there are some wild carrots down there, and we have some moss growing on the remnants of what used to be a concrete parking area. We have, I think that's catchfly right there in the shade, and some burdock. Absolutely beautiful, beautiful, beautiful stuff. Now, I'm going to have a seat for a second. Now, these are getting ready to just come up. Now, I'm going to give you a look that's not so pretty, okay? It's functional, and it will be changing a lot, but right now it's not pretty. If you look here, look at all that mess. Okay, here we have the line of lilacs that used to define the property and provide privacy. I cut them down because they were gangly, and they're growing back nice and full. They're already 3 to 4 feet tall, which is nice. But to provide a better and faster privacy screen, I've planted a few little bunches of pampas grass in between the lilacs, which should fill the spaces between them, and they'll grow 8 to 15 feet tall. And then in this area you're looking at, between the lilacs and the small wood path right there, these are beautiful wildflowers, and there's some wild mustard in there I'm going to harvest today. There are some wild carrots in there I'm going to harvest today. There are some ferns in there I'm going to remove to transplant on the north side of the house. There are daffodils, which are going to, daffodils which are going to stay there. But this whole area to the compost bin, between the lilacs and the wood path, and extending a little further as you get closer to the bin, that's going to be my Three Sisters patch. Now, Three Sisters, and I'm going to plant it hopefully today. It all depends if my body holds out long enough. But if not today, tomorrow. What I'm going to do is something I really don't usually like to do. I'm going to put down a layer of plastic, cutting holes to allow the daffodils to stand up through, because the daffodils are done blooming and have been for a little bit now. And what happens is that the greens remain behind. Now let me show you daffodil greens so you can see. We're heading toward them. Ah, mustard. Love mustard. Little buttercups. Not good to eat. Buttercups are not good to eat. They're pretty, but that's all that they are. Now right here is one of our patches of daffodils. And as you can see, the flowers have gone, and you have those dead ends. If you can leave it alone at this point, now I need to weed the buttercups out from amongst them. Well, I guess I don't need to. It's kind of pretty, but, and the buttercups bloom after the daffodils are done, and the daffodils will come up through them just fine. I think I'll leave them there in that little patch, but those greens that remain, that look like tall grasses, that remain after your daffodils have died off. And I have another patch here of a different variety. It's hard to see in amongst the buttercups and what actually are weeds to me. Now those grassy looking things are actually also daffodils. So I'm going to lay the plastic, allowing the greens to stay up, because those greens help nourish the bulbs so that next year your flowers will be nice and strong and produce well for you. Now if you find you have a huge, vast space that's covered by daffodils and they're coming up every year but they're not producing flowers or not producing many, odds are you just need to dig them up, separate those bulbs, and spread them out a little bit to give them more room. And then they'll start flowering for you again, okay? And here in this bucket, we have a couple of sad-looking examples of pampas grass, but they're still green, they're going to be fine, the roots are fine, and they're going to be planted today, these two and possibly two more that are in the house. Again, depending on how long things hold out for me, they'll be planted today. And then the compost bin. Now I want to talk to you about it because it's pretty neat. All I did was I took 4 wood pallets and I secured them in the ground with rebar in the one side. The other 2 sides stood perfectly well by themselves. And then the front I attached with only a few screws, not screwed the whole way in, so that once this is full of compost, once this is all mulched down, which it will, I'll be putting more greens in, and it will all mulch down. And once it does, I'll want to take the front off to make it easier to get this out. So I only secured it with a few screws. Things you want to avoid putting in here: anything that's diseased with, say, a fungus, try to avoid. And I don't like putting rhododendron in it because I've heard that rhododendron, well, I know that rhododendron creates in the soil an environment that causes a fungus to grow that makes it unfriendly for a lot of things. So I worry about the plant as well. But most things can go in there. You don't want to put meats, fats, or prepared wheats, like, you know, prepared grains like pastas and things. But any kinds of plants, eggshells, you probably want to cook them a little bit or boil them a little bit first to kill off any salmonella. But you don't have to. But eggshells and any kind of greens can go in there just fine. Here we have one of my 4 rain barrels. And you can see this one is placed on top of some paving bricks. And the reason it is that I want it to be higher than anything I'm watering from it. And it's actually in a low spot in the yard, so that elevated it up. And the reason you want it to be higher is because the water comes out of it by gravity. So if you're trying to water something using a hose, say, that's higher than the level of your water barrel, it's just not going to happen. It's just not. Now, as you can see, there is no spouting above this. No spouting at all. And yet we had a few good rains and it was completely full. And this is a 55-gallon drum. And, you know, they're very commonly used now as rain barrels. As I mentioned in the rain barrel video, which you might want to check out, make sure that nothing caustic or poisonous was held in it before you got it, okay? You know, make sure it was foodstuffs or something like that where it's going to be conducive to water. You can also buy these already made in a kit to use as a rain barrel, and then, you know, you're pretty good to go. Then right here we have behind it, you can see the blue thing that looks like a tent that actually just provides shade to work in, but it's extremely small and you can only work with a trowel and not a full-size shovel when you're in it. So I haven't really used it as much as I was hoping to. But in the foreground is what I'm calling my apple bush. I had an apple tree here. It's an heirloom variety. Wonderful little apples. I like them, very mildly sweet. Thick-skinned though. My mother doesn't care for them at all. But I like them, and I'll tell you what, the wildlife really likes them. But the tree became diseased, and then a neighborhood child drove nails into it, and that finished it off. So I cut it down, knowing that apple trees, like many things, the lilacs included, will grow back from the roots. So what I need to do this year, and what I need to do soon, I think, is clear it out quite a bit. I'm going to allow it to grow in this 4 by 4 foot square, And that's the width and that I'm going to allow for this supposed so-called bush, even though it's just a series of trees growing out from the roots. But what you want to do with apple trees, pear trees, things like this is something I learned from Monty Don, who is a presenter for BBC, has been involved with Gardener's World and a lot of other programs. And he always says that with apple trees, what you want to imagine is a pigeon needs to be able to fly through the branches without getting hit, with, you know, to be able to fit through their flying. And that's the amount of space that you want to let sunlight and air circulate in there in order to have a nice healthy tree. So as you can see, a lot of those are going to have to go. Right next to them, we have burdock. Burdock is great for a lot of things. You can, people use the leaves in various dishes. Every part of it's edible. The roots can be used in place of, say, water chestnuts in Asian cooking, and they're really great, but they are highly invasive. I have little patches of burdock all over, and this one you're looking at here, I'm not sure, there's one of two I think I'm going to allow to be the permanent burdock patch. It might be this one, but I want to get rid of a lot of these anyway, and they reseed and they spread, so be aware of that. And they spread really well, so be aware of that if you plan to cultivate burdock, that it's going to be something you're going to have to deal with. This here is poison hemlock. Doesn't mean you can't touch it. It's not like poison ivy. It's fine. It won't hurt you to touch it. Don't ingest it. And then here, oh, and see, you can recognize it. It's really nice and tall. It's pretty. It's actually very pretty. You know, and there's a patch of it back there. All of this poison hemlock, that, and that patch back there, all of these came because my mother had a poison hemlock plant growing in her yard, dug it out. Apparently it was seeding at the time. And I said, oh, just throw it by the garage in my yard. We'll make a compost pile there. And, you know, since then I've had a lot of the poison hemlock. I really do like the way it looks. But again, it spreads like crazy, does nothing for you. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful to look at. Really like it. So I always feel bad. I get rid of it every year and I feel bad, but, you know, it's not doing anything for me. Now here we have the first of my goji berry bushes. I have a couple that I bought, and you can buy all your plants if you want to, but I don't want to. I needed to buy some so that I had some, and this one's doing really well, looking really healthy and happy in its little home. What I'm going to do now, since it is doing pretty well, is I'm going to take some cuttings from it. And when I do that, I'll show you how to grow new plants from old using cuttings. Next door to it, we have the stone bed. I made it higher in the back than in the front. And it contains a red currant that this year is just exploding. You can see though, oh, it's rich with fruit. Oh, it's so rich with fruit. Look at this. Oh my gosh. I just noticed that because I kept getting distracted by the mustard that's growing up through it. But look at those. They're everywhere. Oh, I'm so happy. Oh yeah. But I need to put either bird netting over this or put a fence around it. I'm thinking what I might do is build a frame with wire mesh that I can open the door and just leave that around it. That's what I'm thinking of doing. But I need to build a door with it because I need to be able to access it to harvest. Now here we have some cold weather things that we planted. You can see that the cold actually got to those. And these are peas. Now, that little patch is too dense. And that means that I need to clear some of them out. You don't want to pull them out because you'll disrupt the roots of the ones that remain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to snip off some of those. I'm going to do that today, and I'm going to put between this post, this one I'm not using, between this post and this post, I'm going to put a wire mesh backdrop, and we can let the peas climb it. So that'll make them happy. Then you come here to elderberries. Again, I'm going to be taking cuttings from these this year. You can see that they're already getting ready to make flowers. Very early, it seems to me. But see, you've got little clusters going on. That's wonderful. But they're getting big, they're spreading, they're doing what they do. I'm going to take cuttings from them because I want to have them all along this area here that you see, which has some tall grasses that I'm going to be pulling out. Has, again, some wild mustard I'm going to harvest. But this is a really marshy area. And in marshy, swampy, boggy areas, elderberries do just fine. They can grow in the middle of swamps. They do great. So I'm going to put a whole bunch of them here. And I've changed my plans with something I was working on. Now you can see this that got started and then left behind. This I had dug out to lay down a stone walking path. And if you can see, it curves and then goes up toward the house. And right about in the most curvy part, I'm going to change it. I'm going to have it cut more sharply and go straight across. I'm going to dig all of this out and make a bit of a pond that I'm not going to allow to be completely sealed. I'm going to allow some of the water to escape from it, keeping this area here boggy. And you can grow red currants in shade. They don't mind a bit of shade. And they also don't mind water, but they don't like standing water. So they're pretty versatile too. And those are a couple of things you can put in swampy areas where they'll be pretty happy and do well for you and thrive. And look at this pretty patch of buttercups. These are pretty. These are going to go. They are pretty, but they're going to go because the stone path is going to go right through here and straight across. And then here we have some more red currants that need to be shored up. We have some blueberries that need to be weeded and protected from birds. And then here we have the hosta patch. Now the hosta patch, I want to give a shout out and a big thank you to my friend Jen, who gave me these hostas. And it wasn't too many years ago. And as you can see, the house needs work as well. The hostas have done really well here. They're looking a little unhappy right now because they came up, got really lush and green, and then they got frosted, but they'll bounce back. And they love this area right now because it's shady. But I think what I'm going to do is, I know these two trees, there are two trees, one there and one behind me, and they're coming down. They are shading too much of the property. I need this area for things that need sun, and they have to go. And I'll be using the wood from them on site. Here's another view of the hostas. Now, when the trees go, the hostas have to go. They would be getting full sun here for the majority of the day. Hostas don't care for that. And I have the perfect place for them to go, which I'm going to show you here in a second. Before we move on, let me just say that what this area is going to be, it's a flat square that my predecessor dug out and just kind of let go to waste, and I turned it into a hosta bed, which was nice for a while, but the hostas are going to be moved. In its place, I'd like to put a small greenhouse. Now you might be worrying about it being so close to a wood frame house, but I think what I'm going to do there is I'm going to remove the solar heater. Now what that does is it has glass panels. It has inside a series of tubing, and I may have shown you this, or I may not have, because there actually are videos on how to do it available on YouTube in quite a lot of places. But it does provide heat in the winter, but that room isn't insulated, so the amount of heat it provides isn't really much, and I think I would get a lot more benefit out of a greenhouse than I would out of that heater. So I'm going to dismantle that, fix the hole, use the windows as the windows, some of the windows for the greenhouse, and I have other windows as well, some being used for projects and some that are just sitting, that aren't doing anything for me. And so it's going to go right here. The house on this back side, I will be doing something to protect it from moisture. And then you can see at the very end of the path, or the patch rather, there's a nice lilac bush, nice big lilac bush. Yeah, it's gonna go. I don't really care for it. It's gonna go. So that's it for this side of the house. Let me show you the shady side, because it's kind of exciting. Okay, we're now on the north side of the house, which is pretty much always bathed in shade, and I just think it's so pretty. We've got all these tiny little ferns. They really are tiny. Let me show you. Look at the size next to my hand. Tiny little ferns starting up in amongst moss. Got stumps that remain from a hedge that I removed. It was a cedar hedge. I left the stumps because I like the way they look, and the ferns have been growing up all around them. I have a giant, out of control mock orange that is going to be cut back. In particular, some of this undergrowth is going to be cut so that you can move more easily in amongst it. And look at all that moss. Look at how beautiful. That is the most pillowy, cushiony, comfy, wonderful looking moss ever. I love it. And let's go on to the other side beyond the mock orange. Okay, here you can see beauty and problems all together. We have this great cushiony moss. There are some tiny, absolutely tiny dandelion leaves coming up through. And that's because the moss, in addition to the shade, the moss kind of crowds out all these other things and it dwarfs them. Look, coltsfoot. I think that's coltsfoot. Nope, that's another dandelion. Right there on its little side now. And there's some ground ivy. Beautiful. I love ground ivy. Look at this. People consider it weeds. It's beautiful. And there are actually uses for it, I think. I'm not sure, medicinally or something. I'll have to look that up. But beautiful little plant, pretty to look at. Tiny little bells. You know, it's a lush green. It stays green. Makes a great ground cover. People hate it. They treat it as weeds. And they think that anyone who has it in their garden is being lazy, or they'd have it gone. I would prefer that to a lot of things. I'd prefer a whole ground covered in that rather than grass. You know, rather than the fescues and all that crazy stuff people put in their lawns. Now, problems. Ivy is now growing up the house and looks good, but damages the wood. That has to go. I can rip that down in no time, but you know, it's a matter of getting to it, and I will. Here's another problem. As you can see, the house is, and I hope the wind isn't causing too much trouble with the mic because it's really windy all of a sudden. The paint is peeling off of probably most of my house, but on this northern side, it's so moist over here and you don't get direct sunlight to dry anything out. That wood is just going to rot. Now what I need to do is I need to think of a way to fix that, and I think I have, but it's crazy. It's really wild. We've got the shaded area. We've got the ferns growing. We've got the ivy that I can encourage to grow here and there where I want it instead of where I don't. We've got some nice little forget-me-nots up there and they're happy. In the distance, that patch of tall stuff behind the two serviceberry trees, or shrubs, is, I think they're shrubs. I planted those, I should know. But they provide berries that are supposedly good for people to eat. The birds love them. And beyond them, I have blackberries. They volunteered there. I love them, but they're in the front of the house. I don't know. I might remove some of them, fence off any area that goes from the side of the house back, and it can be my little wooded area. Problem is, here we have this steep hill, and it ends right at my parents' house. And I don't really know where the property line is. My father says that his garage might actually have its roof extending beyond the property line. If that's the case, the property line is pretty much at the base of this hill. So before I would do any fencing, I'd have to find out where it is, and I'd have to make the fencing so it works well with this slope. But that might be a thing, and that'll create more of that illusion of the secluded wooded area. And then, of course, remove the wild flowers and encourage more growth and spreading of the ferns and incorporate the hostas. And I think this will be absolutely beautiful. We can put a little seating area here. And then if you look up there, that bay window, the right-hand window is Spike's. That's where Spike the bearded dragon always goes to relax. So pretty, so pretty. And she does get some sun. I came up to check on Spike thinking I might get to show you her sunning in her window, but she's not there. And there's a little patch of thick grass. That must go. And then, sorry, that sounded creepy. And some more ferns. They don't look too healthy, but we'll get them there. We'll get them there. They've been beat up and stuff. I just, Mom's landscapers were mowing here, and I just talked them into not doing that anymore. And now we've returned to the potting area on the southern side of the house, and the matching out of control mock orange that's over here. I actually kind of like this one being out of control though. And a maple tree. It must go, because it doesn't belong there. But that is our tour and the plans for things coming up here quickly. And I just wanted to show you around and show you what we have in the works. And hey, guess what? Just between you and me, a neighbor who was walking by while we were doing our tour wished me a happy Mother's Day. Today's Mother's Day, and I have no children, but it still made me feel good to be wished a happy Mother's Day. Does that make me crazy? But anyway, that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And oh, another thing I wanted to tell you while we were over on the north side, I got distracted. To protect that side, that wall, what I'm thinking of doing, and it does sound crazy, is doing it little bit by little bit, so it's done and finished section by section, so that nobody gets mad when they look at it. There's a bird. You can't really see it. Oh, there's a nest. See that bunch of stuff there on that chain link fence? In the deepest part of that growth, where they feel nicely cuddled up and secure, I see a nest, and I see Mama Bird feeding baby birds, but I can't see Mummy well enough to tell what species she is. That's the first I've seen that nest. It's really well hidden. Oh, that's wonderful. Hi, Mama Bird. But anyway, happy Mother's Day, Mama Bird. Yeah, so what I plan to do is paint on liquid rubber, scrape off the old paint, paint on liquid rubber to seal it, maybe figure out some way to try to dry it. I'll keep focusing on the birds while I tell you about this in case we get a good look at them. I don't think we will, and I don't want to go close and actually bother them. The wildlife in my yard, as the season progresses, gets to the point where they're really comfortable having me around because I come out and I don't bother them. I go about my business, I let them go about theirs, so they come to the point where they realize I'm no threat, and so then at that point they just come really close to me and I get to get a really good look at everybody. I enjoy that. But anyway, yeah, paint liquid latex or liquid rubber over the wood. If, you know, I'll do the research first to find out if that's a bad thing. And if it's not, I'll do that. If that is a bad thing, I'll find some other way to protect it from moisture. And then make things, there was an ant climbing on me, I blew it off. And then make things that are kind of trellises or stairs. I want it to be something I can climb, clear to the upper roof of my house. That's not my house, but to the upper roof of my house. And plant things that grow up it as well. So it'll be a living wall. I want the north side to be a living wall of deep, rich, lush foliage, so that when you're sitting in that little space I showed you, that little area along the north side of the house, you just feel like you're in a secluded woodland. I might even add a small water feature. It's a robin. I just saw the other parent watching over it. It's a robin. Huh, neat. Anyway, Happy Mother's Day, everybody, and thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the tour, and I hope maybe I gave you some ideas. If you have any ideas that you can share to help me out, too, with any of the things I mentioned, just let me know. The greenhouse is going to be made mostly of reclaimed things, so, any ideas that could help, I appreciate. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye-bye.